Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Would all who wish to join me in the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I would make a motion to adjust the agenda as shown, removing items 8E, 2 through 4. So the policies AC star, all of the AC policies. Is there a second?
A second.
Any other proposed agenda adjustments? We'll go ahead and vote. We're in person, so all in favor? Passes 5-0. I would make a motion to approve the minutes from February 4th as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or corrections? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Passes 5-0. I would make a motion to approve regular warrants 16 and 17, payroll warrants 16 and 17, main purse, January 2025, and bullet bond 4. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. The floor is open for public comment. Seeing no public comment, we'll go ahead and move on to acknowledgements. Jake?
Nothing at this time, thank you, though.
Just like to acknowledge, I know it's wrapping up sports seasons and there are all kinds of successes, which we'll hear about, but I'd like to acknowledge how many of the teams got recognized for good sportsmanship as well. Several teams were specifically named for that and some were just called out. I know the basketball team was called out in the paper that both of the competitors had showed good sportsmanship, so I'd like to acknowledge that. Kevin?
And none of this time.
No. No. Mark?
I got nothing. Thank you.
Students? Okay. Meredith, anything?
I do. I'm trying to find it. I was trying to figure out why the camera seems to be stuck. So I wanted to just acknowledge a few of our students who had standout honors over the last couple of weeks in athletics. And I don't want to forget anyone, so hopefully I won't, since I can't find my paper and my stack. So to begin with, we had a track athlete win the state title for long jump. Osna Nobel To'olo won that state championship. In Nordic, Clara White won all around athlete from all classifications and won both championships for both types of Nordic events. And I can't remember the two types of Nordic events. So my
Skate is one of them.
Yeah.
yeah, so the two different, one for both. And both the boys and girls Nordic teams won the state championship for sportsmanship. The boys were the runner-up for the team competition. And Gage Duran, our middle school and high school cheer coach, was named coach of the year for high school cheering coaching in our classification. So those honors were newly bestowed over, I think, February break, and worthy of recognition. Did I forget any, those of you who were on the call, and Dorsa, Connor, did I forget any of the championships? I know we had some other medalists, but I was trying to do the championships.
I think Oslo was the only first place medalist from track.
We did have,
Go ahead.
I was going to share in the report, but we did have, I was going to share those, but also that we did in the swim team for the Penobscot swim team, they earned PBC runner-up in the championships. And we had two individuals on that team, which was Evelyn Titus and Sophia Tatunik. So they did a fantastic job with that. And then I think otherwise I'm looking through my list real quick. You know, obviously we're really proud of all of our athletes and all their accomplishments, including, you know, the boys that made it to the Northern Class B championships for basketball. But otherwise, I think looking at my list, Oh, I also did mention the Special Olympics teams. They did fantastic in both their bocce tournament and their winter games the week prior to the vacation week.
And actually also since we've last met, the middle school boys A won the Penobscot Valley Middle School Championship for basketball. So lots of accolades for our students. And that's all.
Thank you. Go ahead and move on to reports. Let's see, are we expecting Lisa?
So it's principal reports. So is Maddie's going to
Maddie's
report
gonna
for
go.
Carrie, and
Okay.
Richard also could make it. Richard is at the spelling bee.
Yeah, lots of things going on. So Maddie, sounds like you're gonna start us off with ASA.
Sounds great. Sorry, you do get the B team because Carrie isn't here. I have a couple things to highlight from the report. I wanted to really do a strong shout out to Angie McLaughlin and Nate Case. They are taking on the role of volunteer coordinator or coordinators at ASA, and they've really done some work in reimagining that. So that's been pretty exciting for us. Bringing in people for sledding, which is something we've typically done. We had our sledding party today, actually. But also taking on something new. We're trying a career fair at ASA to start getting kids to reimagine their futures. So we have that going at the end of the week, our first one. We're hoping it will be an annual event, but that's been pretty exciting. We also were approached, and I think Meredith Diamond was too, by Aaron Strain at the university to take on some first-year college students who are interested in becoming teachers. So they, in addition to doing the 30 hours of observation, they are also meeting as a cohort on site. So I have a group of 8 students who come in and go to different classroom placements and spend some time there. And then we meet as a group to really think about what it is to be a learning professional. And then thinking about our resource, our language arts resource, and the piloting that we've been doing with a couple different programs. We had some teachers who were able to go on a couple site visits and explore both the My View program and the Wonders program. So we had a group that went to Appleton and a group that went to Auburn. Actually, on the snow day, they went the night before, so they were still working hard on that snow day. Not that the rest of us weren't, but they are bringing that information back to our literacy leadership team, and they will review their thoughts and hopefully be ready soon to move forward on a recommendation for a program for us to move forward with next year.
Yeah,
and those were the things I plan to highlight.
Thank you. Any questions? And I think the middle school, we just have the written report, and we'll move up to the high school.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, hi. So as Brian mentioned, and certainly thank you to Meredith as well. There was a lot going on over break and the week prior as well with our athletic programs. So just many of them were highlighted, but just a huge shout out to all the coaches, all the athletes, and anyone else who helped, parents, family members, obviously as well, to make the seasons a huge success this year. We got a lot to be proud of, and from what I'm hearing from all of our students, some of the best memories that they can carry forward. So thank you to everybody. Other than that, what I wanted to also say, a great shout out to is our Step Up Day was a huge success, as we mentioned. And I just wanted to, I didn't in the last meeting be able to really thank Derek and his crew and Ben and his crew for helping us make that happen. Ben and the kitchen staff, I think they had a total of 6 lunches that day that they had to work through, and different groups of kids in different locations. So that was amazing. And then certainly Derek and his crew really worked hard to make sure that the school looked great, and also that we had all the different needs met, as well as Scout with the OPAC. So just a huge thank you to all the staff, all the students, everyone who really helped that be a good success. We did recently count our exit tickets, which is one of the questions we ask is, after, how was Step Up Day, which was really great, positive remarks, but also, what are your thoughts about coming to Orno? And based on that, 33 tuition students said that they were definitely considering about coming to Orno. We may or may not get all those kids, but that meant I felt like that we had a very positive experience with our Step Up Day. So thank you to everybody. And then I think otherwise in my section, I think everything has been covered. Oh, just wanted to shout out real quick, two other things. The information family night that we had on the 10th. We had, to be fair, more parents attend and families attend than we've had in years past. And Meredith Diamond and our two school counselors worked very hard to put the evening on with the help of our staff and some students. It was a good turnout, a great experience for the families. And so we're certainly hoping that, kind of topped it off for them to come to OHS. And also just wanted to say thank you. We have an amazing group of parents that really every once in a while reach out and say, hey, we want to do something for your staff. And there was a brunch that they put on Friday the 7th that was unbelievable. The staff really appreciated it, and it's really great to have such support, particularly at the higher levels when the kids are kind of getting older. It's just really, really great to see all the families that come out in a variety of ways to support our students and our staff. So thank you. Meredith?
Something else to add to Sam's capture of Step Up Day as a credit to the organizers and the student ambassadors is that in the exit tickets, one of the questions that's asked is, were you considering Orno before Step Up Day? And then what is your feeling after? And we had 5 students who said that they either weren't considering Orno or were maybe considering Orno. And then those moved to yeses subsequent to Step Up Day. And so I think that's a great credit to, the hard work and the commitment to evolving in our programming in a way that is responsive to, what folks are seeking for their students. Something I'm super proud of is the way in which, we have continued to evolve to continue to broaden the scope of opportunities that are available for students. And sometimes that means supporting where support is needed and then just plain getting out of the way. And we have a number of examples of students actualizing things for themselves in the past couple of weeks that I just want to highlight. One of those is the members of the Environmental Club have identified climate education as an area that they would like to see more comprehensively addressed in their learning opportunities here at Orono High School. And so we have 5 students who have been working really since like mid-January, developing a presentation for the Orono High School faculty, highlighting what it might look like to have climate education embedded across disciplines and grade levels. And they're going to be making a presentation to the Orono High School faculty at our faculty meeting this Thursday. Students identifying and something that they want to see happen and then, putting the work in to communicate that. We have 3 students who, through their work in the business program at UTC, have developed project professionalism, which is essentially a 3-course workshop for students who want to invest time in developing their world-ready skills. And that has unfolded in the PAC pretty much, in 3 discrete sessions over the month of February. It was so impressively organized and delivered. Students were engaged and purposeful, and just want to give a shout out to those students, Asia Marzilli, Jay Tweedy, and Austin Speck, for their investment in that. And that is the results of that and their process they are presenting at Skills USA as part of that competition. So we wish them the best of luck. And then lastly, we have 5 students who are going to the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium at the university this Thursday. And this is really a continuation of the work that began when we first started talking about AP Capstone. These students were in our first cohort of AP Seminar. They were in our first cohort of AP Research last year. And these 5 students have decided to continue with that work and are going to be presenting it to an audience on Thursday that is being drawn together from across Northern New England. So students from New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. I've heard from organizers that this is the most competitive season that they have had of this symposium. Students who have completed projects submit them for consideration for oral presentations. There are only 7 oral presentation spots. And 2 Orono High School students are going to be presenting orally on Thursday. And the students in competition include students from some very elite private boarding schools, where there is a lot of emphasis on independent research and a lot of funding to support that. And the fact that little old Orono High School has students competing at this level is not something that I can emphasize enough as an incredible accomplishment. One of the caveats for this symposium is that the projects are not considered one-offs for students. So it's not like a science fair where the project begins and ends and then students move on. One of the things that they want to see is continued investment and continued inquiry, and the idea that the project students have undertaken have a longevity that goes beyond just doing something for school. And so it feels like we're entering the realm of growing some real researchers here in this district, and the kind of investment that takes from this group, the incredible hard work and dedication of Katie Quirk has really started to actualize and take root. And I am going to be really excited to see how that goes on Thursday.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
And maybe you missed this while I was setting my hotspot up, or maybe I missed this. The step up day, it sounds really awesome. Like, how does that compare to like last step up days in terms of numbers and stuff?
Sam, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so we last year we did our exit tickets a little differently. And so we had them at the very end of the actual day, and they actually could submit them to us and give get a t-shirt, get for a drawing. This time we did it so that they did them on the bus rides back to their schools, and they were then able to get their names put into a drawing as well for filling those out. And so we found that with the version last year, we had everybody fill them out, but not all of them knew. We got a lot more maybes and a lot more don't knows, and I can look up the exact data if you want. But I don't have it right now, so I can give it to you the next time we have a meeting. But this time, especially with the change and in the way that we delivered it, we got more, responses that had more definitive yeses or nos than we got maybes. And also the feedback, I think, was more positive as far as the day itself and the impact that this step up day had when I reviewed the anecdotal data. But as far as the numbers, I can talk to my step up day crew and try to pull that up for you guys for next time if you want.
I'm just kind of curious. I'm also curious how like the mailings we sent out, how those are working with this and stuff, in terms of people responding or using them. If you have any sense of the step up day.
So at the step up day, we didn't reference, we referenced the kids did in the conversations with the panels, the mailings that we sent out and our strategic plan and such things, but that wasn't like necessarily a highlight that we captured throughout the entire with the entire group, other than our messaging matches what the strategic plan messaging is and what we've agreed upon as a district. But I think with the exit tickets, the reason why 33 is great is because, to be fair and to be honest, it really highlights what the kids felt about that particular day. And those are much more positive than and like I said, the anecdotal data was much more positive than we've gotten in the past. So I think the day, as Meredith mentioned, we worked hard to really take feedback from a lot of different sources to make the day a more profitable one, enjoyable one, engaging one, but truthful to who Orono High School is and RSU 26 is. So how much of that numbers and that data reflects also the mailings, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, Noah. But I can get you the data for next meeting as far as to compare the two. But we added a lot of new elements this year, I think, that we hoped increase their engagement with the current Orono High School students and their excitement to want to come here, and still reflected who we are.
And I can't contribute any causation to this, but our attendance at the parent night, I think, was fivefold what we had last year. And I think that is an event that may point to the impact of mailings, just because, imagining those as more of a parent-facing effort rather than student-facing. We had a significant increase in the number of parents, and I have to think that has at least something to do with the efforts that we've made in the interim.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead and move on to superintendent report.
I was distracted by trying to work on the video when you were doing the agenda adjustment. I'm not sure if you mentioned the AC policies, why we're,
I didn't say,
Switching those,
I
so I
was
just
gonna say it when we got there, or you can say it now.
okay. So we got additional guidance. We've gotten kind of a cascade of guidance, first from our attorneys after receiving word that we were going back to the 2020 Title IX policies. And we then had a policy meeting based on what the attorneys said. And then we got some further guidance from MSMA that caused us to recognize that the Drummond guidance was a little incomplete. And we needed to go back and make sure that the references to some of the main specific elements needed to be in there as well. So, and that it just takes some time because they're really long policies. So we'll be reviewing those at policy committee next week, and we'll bring those back March 11th. Because we thought we had them ready and then realized we didn't. So that's what's going on with the AC policies. I wanted to let you all know that the long journey on the Soccer Lights project is taking hopefully a positive step forward. It looks like we are getting on the planning board agenda for the March 19th meeting, which is a major step forward. We've been working, I think, you know, it's a good thing that we've had to take these steps to make sure that the town staff felt like our application was ready for the planning board and when it gets sent back. And so they have said they're moving it forward to the planning board. And I think there's a slight concern because we did have one neighbor not sign the agreement, but the neighbor also said, we're not going to oppose the project, or, you know, if you take this forward. And so, and it was the neighbor who's impacted the very least. And we also think that perhaps with some slight design changes at install, we can maybe just eliminate that little bit of spill from that property line. So fingers crossed for that meeting. I know the Friends of Orono group is really engaged and wanting to be present. If any of you are interested and available in coming or tuning into the planning board that night, it will be happening. Finally, you may have seen in and I think Susan talked about it last meeting. We also put it in the newsletter. We're having a parent forum on Thursday night, March 13th. That is a social worker, clinical social worker and psychotherapist, Lynn Lyons. And the session, it really is on targeting parents who, you know, raising children in the era of a mental health crisis and smartphones, social media, and all of those pressures. And Susan heard her speak back in the fall, doing a talk for another district, and really feels like she's going to provide what we've been looking for to provide, you know, just some community conversation around those topics. So please talk to your friends and neighbors about that and encourage folks to come. I know it's during spring break for the university, so, but we were trying to put it next to our in-service day so we can also have her speak to our staff the next morning. But we hope that we can have a good showing for that. It's in the OPAC at 6 p.m. That's all I had for my report. We have plenty to talk about on the agenda, but are there any questions?
No questions? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to budget.
So you have the typical papers in your folder. Lynn is on her way down, I think, to join us for this conversation. I think to begin with, we have talked just at a high level over the last couple meetings, first about our subsidy. You heard that our subsidy came in through our ED 279, and it's preliminary, so but it's what we use at this point. And the bottom line on our ED 279 is that we are gaining $689,000 and some change in state subsidy, which is great news. Along with that, there was a slight decrease in the local required allocation. You see that on the next line, the negative 18,000 on the revenue page. So that's kind of the big context to begin with for our revenue picture. And considerably better than where we were starting last year. I think last year we maybe had 300,000 extra in our subsidy from the state, and we had, some big additional expenditures coming with the negotiations year and just some escalation of costs and inflation that we were facing. So as last meeting we looked at just some high level, what's standing out to us as big new expenditures in the budget. But this is the first time that you're seeing how it's all put together with everything else. So if we want to start with, I'll just share my screen so we can all make sure we're looking at the same document. Should be a little more prepared with that. There's just a delay up there. So to begin with, I'm going to skip this top page and go down to the detail pages, and then we'll come back to see how it all fits together. So with revenue, really, we just start at what are we getting from the state? What's our local required? And then the rest of this is the tuition calculations. Lynn works with a variety of people to put together the regular tuition and special ed tuition. I would say we're using our formula that we've been using for several years as a starting point with tuition, and that's looking at what is the population amongst the 5 schools that are our tuition primary towns, and taking a percentage of that that's shown relatively, consistent in history. And that number we're using is the 24%, right, Lynn? 24%. So last year, for example, we were feeling after Step Up Day, like we didn't have as strong an indication yet that we have now. And we budgeted, I think, for 20 last year, and we ended up keeping it at 20. We ended up getting 23 students last year, which resulted in getting 21% or almost 22% of what was available for us. But the year before, the 3 years before, it was in the low 30s. So it's just, sometimes the tide can shift and you get, larger groups. If we were to get the number that Sam and Meredith talked about, they learned about on the exit slips, it would rebound back to where we were at our strongest point, actually, with this year's graduating seniors. That was almost 35%.
When you say low 30s, do you mean low 30s?
Percentage-wise, yes. But also, like 33 is the number I think Sam said. And if we got 33, we would have 35% of the base, which is a really strong number. So while I love that number, it would be surprising if we got that, but we've gotten that percentage before. But what we budgeted on is 24%, which is what guidance came out of our enrollment study that we had done some years ago. So the subsidy that you see on the tuition regular line is for 22 students. So it's showing an increase because we budgeted for 20 last year. Lynn also looks at how many students do we have 10 through 12 that are tuition students, how many students, are graduating in the senior class that are tuition students. And so, right now we're showing a net positive. We'll continue to monitor that number and make adjustments if we feel like, adjustments are prudent based on the information that we get over the next 6 to 8 weeks. The special ed tuition, again, is just based on what we know about current students and what we're projecting about incoming students. And there's almost a wash. I think we're losing one more student than we're projecting to gain in the freshman class, but it's just a projection of the freshman class at this point. But also special ed tuition is highly dependent on student specific needs and costs, because one special ed student can have very little cost above regular tuition, and another student might have significant cost above regular tuition. So it's not as scalable as the regular ed tuition just by per person. The next set of lines really down to E-rate are just a factor of looking up amortization schedules and plans for how bond interest is projected to flow next year. For Milty revenue, that's showing a decrease because there's a different way that we are taking in revenue and then booking the corresponding expenditure against it. And basically it happens outside of the budget, where this year we got $35,802 from the state for our Milty devices. And so we've been building that in the budget and building revenue. And instead of doing that, it's going outside of the budget, and we'll only budget for what Milty is not covering. So we won't have a Milty revenue line anymore, because we won't expense the Milty expenditure in the budget, just what's not covered by the state Milty funds. The one-time purchases from unassigned is showing a drop of 85,000, just because we haven't had the conversation yet about what the board wants to do around, do we want to pull out some one-time expenditures and utilize unassigned? So that conversation's in front of us, so we haven't put anything there yet. But there is potential for that if we decide we want to do that. The Milty purchase, so this is the purchase of the tech laptop replacement plan that we've built out. This is the cost that's not covered by the state Milty funds. So this would be what would hit our expenditures, the 104,000. And in that plan, depending on the year, there are years that are a little bit higher and years that are a little bit lower in terms of expenditures, just depending on what group we're trying to tackle each year. And then the balance forward, last year, we had 929,000 in that we were using from our unassigned to just, balance our budget. That was actually $100,000 more than we had been doing the last few years before that. We did that last year to try to lower that tax burden that was higher than we really wanted last year. We carried forward that number, and it'll be a conversation if that's where you want to keep it. And so the additional local that you see there is just a balancing of expenditures versus what we would need to finish out, revenue to cover all the expenditures that are currently in the budget. So do you have any questions about this page before we go to expenditures? In terms of what the tax increase, you can't really see that on this page. We'll look at that in a moment. Ready to go to expenditures? Okay. So this is the format we usually use. We go cost center by cost center and have tried to pull out what we feel are either the more significant additions or reductions to the budget in each cost center. So for regular education, you can see the increase there. And in every cost, not every cost center, in most cost centers, you'll see a line at the very top of the comment section that says salary and benefit increases and staffing changes or moves. So we don't itemize that out by cost center. There's something at the very bottom of this document. But for regular ed and special ed, the majority of those cost centers are personnel costs. Because that's where the majority of our staff are allocated to, regular ed and special ed. So when you look at all the pluses and minuses, for example, under the regular ed section, and you look over at the increase of 235,000, I would say definitely the majority of that is just salary and benefit changes, increases. But other than that, the ELL ed tech that we added this year to the budget, we did not have that budgeted this year. We added it mid-year. That I mentioned last week, we're recommending to change that to a teacher. So the overall impact of that would be the full teacher amount because the ed tech amount wasn't even in the budget since it was added after budget was set last year. Staff tuition, the requests have just gone down for college courses that people are requesting to take. And we've even added some just in case, just to have some there for contingency. And that's just, different. It goes through cycles, how many people we have that are in programs and taking actively, pursuing degrees and needing certification courses and what have you. We have an increase though, kind of juxtaposition to that is people wanting to go to more trainings and having more associated travel costs for workshops and conferences. Increase in supply costs of around $6,000. The Milty laptops fall in this for student laptops, and that number that you saw on the revenue page is not all student devices. Some of those are staff devices, but the majority are student devices. Increased requests for field trips for Mesa to the tune of about $2,500. A big item I mentioned last week, the ASA staff has been looking at a new curriculum for reading and writing. And so it's going to be a pretty costly purchase. Just that is has a lot of curriculum components to it. And so we've asked the vendors that we're looking at if they would split the cost over 2 years, and I think they both agreed to that. So it would be a cost, this year of $75,000, a cost next year of $75,000. You see $72,000 here because it's offset some other purchases that we would buy if we were still doing Calkins and buying more, decodables and kind of supplemental books to round out the curriculum. Whereas when you buy a soup to nuts curriculum, you're going to have more resources probably than you can handle, especially the first year.
So does this mean that Calkins is going away?
If we end up buying a curriculum, yes. And so we're in the process of reviewing two, and they're going to come to a decision in time for the, I think, April curriculum meeting or March?
April is what we're shooting for.
April curriculum meeting, and then bringing it to the board for approval.
They
But
both have a phonics component.
yes. But
Common sense reading.
I don't want to get into the details of that because I don't know the details, but I can't imagine that it wouldn't have a phonics component. Yeah. So there will be more to
And we
hear
use
about
some
that.
outside expertise in evaluating those as well as staff.
Yes, so can we, I can have Susan unmute and talk about the
It's just
ELA
a big
curriculum.
line item out of the
Yeah.
whole budget that we actually have control over.
Yeah, so I think what would be good is maybe next meeting, they can bring you a little more details about, the options that are being considered.
I want to hear more before we approve
Yeah,
this.
well, and I think where they are in the process now is really still exploratory. And like she just mentioned, they went on a trip to see a school that's doing one of the programs and have, done a lot of research and are piloting. So I don't think the decision is made yet, but they're following a process for both curriculum. So I see Susan taking notes. And so we'll bring that back next meeting for sure. The OMS book line, obviously you probably remember we had the big math purchase. And so taking that out is why you see that big decrease there. And then we have a increase in the OHS book line of around 5,700 for a variety of really smaller book requests, not like a big adoption. And then the high school needs an increase in graduation lines by 1,500. So questions, I heard you want more information about the ELA books. Any other questions or the ELA adoption?
We have anywhere, sometimes at the bottom, but I didn't see it, just the total contractual made an increase in salaries.
Well, what we have is an all-in number for the bottom of the expenditure page under other data. So salary and benefit increases across all cost centers is 585. So that includes the health and dental. It includes workers' comp and paid family medical leave. And what else does it include?
Anything to do with salary.
Yeah.
Everything to do with salary.
That's assuming the 10% and the 4%.
Is assuming the 10 and the 4.
Okay, thank you.
Question like that, maybe they're not right here questions, but just random questions. One of them, maybe it's more on the revenue side, but like, in the case that like the federal government pulls out of funding our school or
Mhm.
something, like, do we have that, like, you know?
Can we come back to that question?
Okay.
Because I think that's a big picture question that we
Yeah.
can talk about when I talk a little bit about unassigned,
Yeah,
but I
That's
can
one-
circle back
okay.
to that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess I didn't know also, this probably isn't here and it's probably new to this conversation, but like the whole, like, we talked about last year, like the Watershed Academy thing, is that money that I don't know if that's going for whatever, like summer stuff, is that money that?
Okay, so the ninth grade program.
Yeah.
The ninth grade program, and that's another program that we're gonna bring some information
Yeah.
forward on. We've been working with a group that has a grant
Okay,
that can help fund that. It did get caught up in the federal freeze and it is now unfrozen again as of today, I'm told. And so there are probably a few things in this budget that are supporting that program, like some of the books, into some of the supplies. Because when we were finalizing the budget, it was a little bit uncertain. And so some of the curriculum pieces, we wanted to have a way to get some books and some new curriculum or some new supplies in the event we did a portion of this without the support of a grant. So as that picture hopefully becomes more clear and over the next few weeks where we refine the budget, we may be able to remove some things if it looks like the grant will remain viable.
but so that's sort of in pieces, that is supported in pieces through in here right now, kind of.
Just a few pieces, just a few.
Does that mean the decision we made to go forward? with that?
No, because we need to come to you. But like the decision hasn't been made about what we're doing for ELA. That's coming this spring, but we're building some budgetary pieces so that we have those ready for, us to.
Then that decision would be made without the benefit of the summer pilot or anything that was planned before.
Yes, but I think the summer pilot, as it was conceived last year, the planning and thinking has changed quite a bit. So.
I mean, that's kind of typical. We have about 2 months where we run in parallel, right? We're approving curriculum and things like that at the same time that we're working on a budget. So
Right,
nothing's set in stone until that all comes together at that magic meeting at the end of April.
that's right. That's right. And that was also on our list to bring forward, prior to that time. Susan, do you recall when we had planned to do that one?
We're planning on talking about with the curriculum committee on the March date, and we'll have something for the board after that.
And just in a couple weeks. So we move to special ed? Do you have any other questions about regular ed? So in special education, aside from salary and benefit increases, some newer some new requests from our folks who coordinate summer school saying they need more time. And feeling like also their work to coordination takes kind of a different skill set. And so wanting to compensate that a little differently than we do for the teacher hours. So you see an increase of $4,300 there. The ed tech that we already added this year that we needed to add for kind of student need, we are now putting in the budget, and that's something that is a billable tuition line item for the sped to revenue on the other side. We need to increase our tutor lines. We're seeing more need for that. Out of district placements, we're projecting an increase there for out of district placements. That's always a pretty costly item. And then a small increase in supplies and a couple of new office computers and moving Learning Ally into special ed. That's a audiobook program, and it's been used. It's been spread out in the budget across cost centers, but when we looked at the data, it's almost exclusively being used by special education. So we're moving those costs into special education. And then contracted services, Lisa's talked about that quite a bit in her reports. Both the amount of services we need and the cost for contracted service providers are both increasing. So we're seeing an increase of 69,000 in total for contracted services. And those are for people like, we have some speech contracted service, OT, PT, school psychologist, and BCBA behavior analyst. Any questions about special ed? CTE, I've heard from UTC that they feel like they can work within their allocation again, and they don't feel like they need to tax the different municipalities and school districts. In other instruction, you see, I don't know, 5 or so additional positions that have all of those are positions that have come to you or information that's come to you over the course of the year about additions. I mentioned the lacrosse thing. I think we mentioned the wrestling, pitching into the wrestling cooperative to pay for a wrestling coach. And then the other 3 are specific ones that are our employees that we brought over the course of the last few months. There will be some others coming to you in the upcoming board meetings. The stipend committee just met, so we'll have some other things coming your way. We removed the AFS stipend. We haven't used that in several years, so we're going to remove that from the budget for now. The drama musicians, the costs of that have gone up. In addition, same with officials, cost of officials going up. Tennis court resurfacing, that's one of those kind of potential big one-time costs that we could pull out for unassigned. Mike feels like it's time to go ahead and do a repainting of the whole court. And while we're doing that, we can correct the pickleball snafu. So that's the cost for the repainting of the whole court, all 3 courts. Mike's been trying to get replacement chairs for the gym for several years, and we've been kicking the can down the road. He had me come over and look at them after a game. That's something we probably could kick down the road 1 more year if we needed to.
Does he know you said it?
He does. He knows I would say that. But it's just kicking it down the road. We are going to need to replace those in a year or so. Batting cage repairs. I think it was a repair and a new net is needed. And then finally, Huddle is a software program that's web-based that can film all kinds of games and athletic contests, and then be available for coaches and teams to review, to look at film, and they trade film with other teams. It can also be used for kind of recruiting purposes. can also be used for broadcasting events. I learned that. That's free of charge for our families, as opposed to NFHS that people have to pay to subscribe to for certain events. So Mike is requesting that we put that in the budget. He's gotten requests from several teams to want to add Huddle as an option. I think it's currently done. I think, does football use Huddle? But football does all the filming themselves. Whereas, this would get equipment that we could do it through, soccer and other sports, and they have equipment, kind of like the NFHS equipment. It's portable that does the auto filming. So that's what the Huddle is. And what's the ongoing subscription cost? Is it $5,500 a year?
No, that was
Yeah.
first.
That's the install. And what's the ongoing? Do you know the ongoing cost?
I will see if I have that.
Okay.
You also have in there, maybe you don't, Mike probably knows the answer to this, but is this, what is provided under this? And is this included, does this have like the base Huddle, or does it have Huddle Assist, or what level of Huddle are we looking
We'll
I
have
don't
to
know.
find that out.
I do know that it's good now, including all the sports.
Because what we're required to have is for football as part of the LTC is just the base level. And then what we've got on top of that has been paid for from sources outside of the budget for football.
I'll ask Mike, or we'll ask Mike what type of Huddle package it is. Bring that back.
So we're not clear though, how much the ongoing.
She's looking at it. She might have a few. And I'll just make that note in case she doesn't find it ongoing. Okay. Any other questions?
We need money to come.
Ready to go to student staff support? So, student staff support, you can see in the note there, it's technology, nurse, guidance, library, curriculum, improvement of instruction. And, this has fewer, staff, costs in it than say regular and special ed, but it's probably the other, like one of the other main categories that does have some staff. We had a request from IT to change the IT assistant from school year to full year. And I think that's a fair request for, them to have some increased manpower. Because there's just, a lot with not just device replacement, but also network maintenance and security. And, I think you've heard a little bit about just the acceptable use policies and how we're trying to really be careful with those, and all the permissions that go with those really takes a lot of time and kind of care with how we're making sure we're maintaining, the correct permissions for everyone. So that's the $10,000 increase there. Again, a little less tuition requests in a couple of areas here, both guidance and tech. The guidance department needs to replace a laptop for an office staff member there. We had a lot of tech training in here because of a couple of kind of special things that were put in the budget this current year. It's not something we need every year, so that's why you see the $4,100 increase for tech training. Power School, there's a module that we need to add. It's $1,800. This is another potential big one-time expense request. The replacement of the wireless access points around the building. Our new internet wireless provider is telling us our access points are part of the issue that we're having, that they're end of life and aren't, able to be updated in the way that, would have optimal performance. So that amount could be something we pull out potentially if we're looking to find ways to decrease the impact of the budget. Tech related supplies, I think, is that one, and it's going down by 2887. We've just, been Susan and the tech committee and Jason, Melissa have been looking at what subscriptions do we have, how are they being used, and figuring out, are there better ways to accomplish needs? And so we're looking at a decrease there. an increase of $4,000 for both. It's kind of a combined line, instructional coach and data specialist to, there's just some increased costs there to maintain those services. We had a purchase of some books this year that we were using, like professional books that we're taking out of the budget for next year. These next couple of items are items that we're putting in the budget in anticipation of losing some money. Title II, we got notified, the DOE has been working with the federal DOE around a finding that the feds had with our state with the way they allocated Title II. And
Could you refresh what Title II is?
Title II is, there are a couple of purposes, but mainly it's used for teacher quality. So professional development, training, developing teacher expertise. And it can also be used for class size reduction. It's been used for that some places, but primarily it's used for professional development. So the bottom line is that the state had to reconfigure how they were allocating their Title II money, and they had to go back and do take money away from districts that they over allocated to for the last several years, and we are one of those districts. And Susan described it to me. She knows all the expert details, but my takeaway is it's because we have a higher percentage of tuition students in our district. And part of the way that the state had to redo things is they can't allocate Title II to a receiving district for tuition students. It has to just go to the home district. So that's part of why we're losing some Title II money, because, we have more than, our high school is 40% tuition. So we're losing about $10,000 a year for the next 5 years. Susan has more details as to why, if you're interested, or why they did that. But so we're suggesting that we move a couple of expenses into the budget that have been in Title II. That's our PrEP membership and our MCLA membership. PrEP is our regional consortium for lots of things, but mainly professional development in the region. And MCLA is the main Curriculum Leaders Association that we have a membership to. And then we usually use Title II money for professional development consultation if we want to bring in speakers or have consultants work with us. And we are, with that loss, and actually, we lost some money this year, didn't we, Susan? Yeah. In Title II, I think they were starting to recognize that they had to reconfigure Title II. So we lost a little bit of money this year, and then we're losing the 10,000. We need to shift some of that money over to budget that we've been spending out of Title II. Mainly our priority for that money is, that's not a girl.
Did they say it's not a drill? Are they having a fire alarm?
Yeah, they said that's not a drill. I think it's
I
a
just
fire
didn't
alarm.
hear. Okay.
Yeah, it could have been colder.
Was it a month ago?
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't have a jacket on because I'm just running inside.
Okay, can you hear us? Okay.
Susan's shaking her head.
So good news is we got an all clear here at the building, so. I think I was at, I had not finished the description of the student staff supports. So the, library at ASA is asking for some furnishing, some bookshelves. They also are not needing as much tuition in their tuition line. And then these tables that we purchased last year for the high school, middle school library, we were able to take those out of the budget now as well. Any questions about those
Library
items?
tuition.
Sorry?
What is library tuition?
So if one of the library staff needs to take courses.
Oh, okay.
So tuition in general always means staff taking courses.
It's a benefit, basically, employee benefit.
And we budget about 1,900 per course. System administration, we're putting forward the request for the halftime assistant for the business office. We just, have contemplated this for the last couple of years, and just based on the amount of grants that we have and the oversight required for a lot of the state reporting we have to do that draws Lynn away from the financial side of the work. We really feel like we need that position. We are requesting to increase the legal line, just knowing that we have negotiations this coming year, and miscellaneous goes along with that. Projecting needing a little more funds for true diligence. That's the service we use to run our own background checks that we put in our policy that we would do for all hires. And then our Survey Monkey subscription cost is there. Increase in fees for our ADS, which is our finance and business software. And then we were able to remove the amount that we budgeted for our middle school application process last year, that we had our architect put together that application. And then we replaced some computers in the central office, so we removed that. Any questions about any of that? For school administration, pretty straightforward on those items. An increase in tuition requests, 1,600. The copier lease, we replaced our copiers this year, and so we have just a decrease in costs nicely. Removing cost where we replaced a computer this year. And then the bottled water, we are proposing that we shift away from bottled water and just have folks use the water filling stations around the building. We're adding a couple at ASA where we feel like we need better coverage there for water access, chilled water for filling water bottles and such. For transportation, kind of a question mark as to what our transportation bids will come in at. The deadline for that is actually this Friday. But we're building in a little flexibility there for our line. I assume that costs have gone up since 5 years ago when we last got our bid. As I mentioned last meeting, we're proposing that we add another van to the district-owned vehicles, but we want this one to be an accessible van. So we've scoped out costs, and we could get a van that's accessible for that amount, slightly used through a local vendor here that's actually not a national vendor, but have access to a lot of inventory around the country. Special ed transportation, just when we have students in out of district placement, sometimes we have to pay mileage or special arrangements for students to get there. So that's what that amount is. And this year we had in the budget to add a lift gate to the truck that we have, the maintenance truck. And so we're taking that out of the budget. And then for facilities maintenance, we had to alert us in the budget this year, that's covered by the COPS grant, we're taking that out because we're going to be making that purchase. Insurances like our liability and building grounds insurance costs have gone up. Equipment repair, I'm not sure about the details of that, but it says floor machines, so
I think all three of our floor machines
need repair. Contracted services, that's adding on our new spaces to our Honeywell monitoring and service plan. That's the ASA grade 1-2 wing that we added those univents in, and then the central office system. This year we had 10,000 budgeted in to repaint crosswalks and do the back speed humps. And then we're seeing that we need more money in OMS for repair and maintenance. As you know, that building, we're trying to let by for now, and we just need more funds in that account. And then finally, debt service, just projecting that increase in our, table of expenditures that we have mapped out. We did see an increase when we last did our ban refinance of interest costs, just because interest had gone up. We will be redoing our final installment. August, September is when that happens. We carried forward the same interest, presuming the same interest increase that we have currently. That's a little bit of a question mark as to what that's gonna end up.
Big question mark at this point. Might have hoped to go down a little while ago, but
Yeah. So, in addition, down at the bottom, Brian asked about that information earlier. So all salary and benefit increases across all cost centers. The increase is 585,420. So, if you look at the total proposed budget, just above that, our total proposed budget increase for expenditures is just over $1,013,767. So over half of that is for salary and benefit increases. We have calculated in 10%. Last year, we budgeted 8%, and our actual increase was 5.73. It's so unpredictable, though. I just felt like 8%. Sue was, and I talked before she rode off into the sunset of retirement. And we just felt like, based on what we're seeing in the loss ratios, 10% feels more comfortable this year, a number. But again, we'll have the actual number before we have to lock in budget. So, fingers crossed that we'll see savings.
And the other thing is in that 585, that does not include the new positions that you see up in there. That's, we back those. So that's not.
That's just for existing staff, yeah.
So any questions on expenses, or do you want to look at the kind of that overall sheet?
The ASA water fountain in the facilities there.
We have it's in already existing lines that we have where we have some funds built in. So we plan on putting one. There's not a water fountain down in the grade 1-2 wing. And there's not a water fountain or bottle filling station in the cafeteria. So those are the two places we plan on putting.
What do those cost?
Derek's still getting costs on that. I think it's gonna be around 3,000. But that's just a guess.
Cool. Is this facility, is that where back there, lawn mowing and all that's in?
Yes.
I'm curious, how much does it cost to do you know how much that?
Yeah, we do know what that contract costs. Lynn will have to.
Yeah.
So that contract is for both snow removal and for grounds maintenance in the growing season. And so they remove snow from our playgrounds, our sidewalks, our walkways. The town does parking lots. And so where the parking lot ends, everything else, we have Black Bear do. And
70
say that again,
70,000.
70,000. And then there's the fields and other, you know,
Yeah.
mowing and trimming and such. So if we go to this summary page, everything for expenditures, you know, is built into this bottom section. And that increase of expenditures from 1 year, from current year to what we're proposing for next year matches what we just talked about from the detailed page, that 1,013,767. So in order to fund the budget, we would have to increase taxes by $363,533 if we passed it as it stands right now. So, you know, some of the conversations that we need to have are around unassigned and how much you're comfortable with what we've already proposed coming from unassigned. If we want to add anything else from unassigned. Another part of the conversation, I think, with unassigned goes back to Noah's question of, we talked about this a couple meetings ago, you know, if federal funds were to be withdrawn from us, you know, unassigned is where we have the potential to close that gap in the interim if things feel uncertain. So I think that's part of your thinking about how much we use unassigned to lower taxes,
Wait,
potentially.
You're saying interim, if things feel uncertain now, like if that happened after the budget.
You could, you know, call a vote to use your unassigned dollars to pay for those costs. You know, Title I budget is it's completely paying for our ed techs who support students in reading and math. There are 3 ed techs at ASA. And other than that, it's just a small amount of supplies, and we have some summer school funds budgeted in the Title I budget. We were going to use our Title I funds and take summer school for Summer Stars out of the budget, but we decided this is not the year to do that with so much uncertainty around federal funds. But we have a good bit of carryover right now in Title I, so we were going to propose to do that, but we're putting that on hold. So, you know, we have summer school already in the budget. So really it would be covering the cost of those 3 ed techs if we had to for Title I. The other thing for Title I and II is we pay a portion of our director of learning salary with our federal funds. And so that would need to be covered. And then in Title II, we have some professional development items that we pay for. So our total, I think I shared with you last meeting, I don't have that open in front of me right now, was around $400,000, almost $500,000, I think, across food service, special ed, local entitlement grant, and then the ESSA Title I, Title II, Title IV, which we end up transferring into Title II. So almost $500,000. But one thing we've done recently is pick out one-time purchases and potentially use some unassigned to pay for those. I mentioned a couple of those as we were moving through the budget. The wireless access point replacement, that's $40,000, the van, that's $45,000. Potentially some of that large ELA, you know, curriculum at ASA, I think is a pretty unusual item that, you know, even when we replace curriculum, usually it's not that much. So that's a pretty anomalous kind of expense as well. The unassigned was the other thing I wanted to just give you a picture of, just remind you that after our audit, our unassigned balance was $2,792,000. No, $2,792,000 and some change. But as you can see on this sheet, this year we put $929,000 from unassigned for our budget, 91,000 from Milty and 85,000 for the one-time purchases. You know, every year we think we're doing a little more to try to bring down. Oh, and the other thing is $200,000 to capital improvement reserve that we've been doing. So all of those things are planning to do this year with our unassigned. That's not too different than what we did the year before, except I think it's $100,000 more for the unassigned. 829,000 went to 929,000. And this, at the audit, our unassigned fund balance went down by 91,000 from FY 23 to FY 24. So we spent, you know, the 200,000 on capital reserve, some Milty money, and then we had, you know, $829,000 to balance the budget, and we ended up only reducing it by 91,000.
We
Wait,
had
we actually-
20. Last,
what's that?
829,000
9, we went up,
last year, though.
Oh,
That's current.
right, okay.
Yeah. So, and I guess I'm trying to paint the picture of how we arrived at the $91,000 that came out of unassigned fund balance at the end of FY 24. That it was built on a budget that had 829,000 in that balance forward line. It had $200,000 going to capital improvement, and it had some amount for Milty. I don't remember it. I could look it up. Was there anything else then? Did we do any? I
Were we
think we did
similar to
fuel
the one time?
stabilization that year. Fuel stabilization?
I don't think that,
That was the year before, I think.
That was new.
Did we have a similar amount in one-time costs or not? I don't.
I can look.
I don't think we had any much.
We did not have any that year.
I mean, the bottom line though, is we tried to spend a whole bunch extra to spend down our fund. And we did by a rounding error.
We had 152,000 for Milty that year. So more for Milty in the year before, in FY 24. You know, most of the, a lot of the volleyball costs ended up coming out of our contingency. Can you think of anything else that was big? Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking like what might hit our budget that's different than typical. That's the big thing, I think.
It's not like we've had a boiler or roof or something,
Right.
No,
nor a bunch of staff positions.
in the current year, we put more one-time costs.
That's the other thing. We hired an ed tech. And,
Right?
well, one's billable. One's billable, so that is a wash, but the ELL ed tech, the MLL ed tech would hit our contingency. And that was hired mid-fall. I think.
Lynn, can you remind me again when you're able to give us an idea of where we are in terms of what we've expended versus what we budgeted?
That's usually a project that I do at the end of March.
We usually do it in March.
Yes,
We do it in
We'll have an
March to
idea
begin
of
with,
that.
and then we refine it in April.
Okay.
Lynn always wants to do it later, and I say, no, remember we started in March.
Lynn wants to do it in December of 2026 with the auditor.
Doesn't want to do it at all.
Well, because like last year, we projected that we would hit
Right.
the unassigned fund balance when we did our projection by 289,000, ended up being 91,000. There's just so much play in the numbers.
And part of that that's so hard is we have, especially our higher cost items. They don't bill us consistently, like they're behind in their billing. So when I'm trying to predict, like for instance, I'm trying to predict our coldest months, our darkest months, what that's gonna be, because they're behind on billing us. Special ed services is another one that, you know, they don't bill us our services until months after they actually happen. So it's hard for me to know in March what they're gonna bill us in April and May. So, you know me, I try to go on a little bit of the conservative side, so that's sometimes hard to do. because of the lag in billing on our being expenses. And I would rather say we're gonna be in a worse position,
Oh, for sure.
position than we are. So I mean, I try to be accurate. I don't do that on purpose, but I also try to be conservative.
Well, it's your job, and it's our job to take on risk that's appropriate, so.
Like, when we were talking last year, we were afraid it would be a horrible budget this year, and this feels like not.
This is not a horrible starting position to be in. We've had 1.2 million in that box before.
So it seems like,
It's not
Well, what's
juicy
it-
though, we lose all of our federal funding, that's like $500,000, right?
I mean,
So, that could be.
realistically, if the federal government, the individual in the federal government were to decide to take away all our federal funding, it would be, there'd be an injunction within 2 weeks at the federal court level. It's gonna be a year or two, right? And then it's probably gonna go all the way up to the Supreme Court. It's gonna be a couple of years before we actually lose funding, I would have to think. First, that assumes that.
That assumes you follow
Actually
the
follows the
injunctions.
court orders.
It is not necessarily the same.
Which will be developing over the next couple of months. We'll have to watch and see what happens with that.
But I do think, we have enough in our savings account to
Right, so,
bridge uncertainty for a year or so.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we have more than enough in our savings account. If it weren't for this other source of uncertainty, I would be pretty aggressive about trying to spend it down. It's just way too high. We've taken money from taxpayers and put it in a bank account. And I don't think that's appropriate. We keep trying to spend it down and we keep not spending it down. This has been my story pretty much the whole time I've been on the board. Is keep saying, let's take a little more. Carry forward used to be 560 and it never was enough to pull it down. So we keep bumping it up and up and up. And part of it is the budget keeps growing. So we probably should be thinking about it as a percentage of the total budget. But 3 million is way too much money to be sitting in the bank, ethically for me. So if we didn't have the uncertainty, I would be trying to very aggressively spend that down.
did you say 3 million?
2.7.
2.7.
Oh, I was looking at the
Well,
wrong line.
When I first came here in FY18, it was 2 million. That was at the end of FY18. So when I first came here, it was, there was some change in how auditing practice and carry forward revenue. I have a note here, but anyway, in FY18, it was 2 million. But then the big jump came during COVID, where we gained about 1 million over, a year's time because of just, we budgeted not knowing what the future held, like things were going to be normal and nothing was normal. And so we had a big under expenditure. And so since that time, we've been, we spent down a little bit of it. We were at, our high was at 3,032,000 at the end of FY21. And so, we've been trying to spend since that time.
Even at 2 million was, and when I came on the school board, it was 1.3. And
Yeah.
again, our budget's almost doubled since I came on the school board. So 1.3 is probably not appropriate, but I personally think back under 2 would be an appropriate target. But that's obviously a conversation to have. And this is probably not the year to be super aggressive given all the uncertainties floating around, but we're not talking $50,000 too much in the account. We're talking multiple 6 figures.
One of the things, Kevin, or no, one of you said, I think it was you, Kevin, that said we felt like it was going to be much worse. Was that you?
Yes.
And I think around tuition last year, we took a big drop in our numbers in our tuition line. And when we look at our Orono residents, though, on the ED 279, and that includes superintendent agreements, that's really stable and strong. Actually, we've grown some, and so the drop that we saw in tuition, if we get as many students as we're losing, then it would be, a stable year. And when Lynn looked at compared to the current year. So we took a hit last year. And we're not, I don't know that we're gonna rebound past that unless we hit that 33 that Sam was talking about. But we have, strong Orno numbers that are continuing to remain steady. If that had dropped this year, then we would have seen a real decline in state subsidy.
I mean,
So
that's
this
another
year,
thing to think about with carry forward rate is we under budgeted tuition because we ended up with about 9 more students than we budgeted for.
Well,
we had 23 students,
that's only ninth graders.
Ninth graders, yeah.
So I could go back and look at the whole, I mean, I did look at them all, but I didn't look as far as budgeted purposes.
Yeah.
We had 3 more ninth graders, but we also had movements in 10 through 12. The other thing with this year is we're losing less 12th graders in this prediction than in last year. Last year we lost
Last year was a big
a
hit
lot
for the 12th grade
of
class.
tuition.
Yeah,
and we projected we were losing more and we're getting fewer than this year. So we closed both gaps a little bit. But if we get anywhere, even half, if Lynn's budget 22, they got 33 slips back from students saying they wanted to come to Orno. If we met in the middle, that would be really good news for our budget, but we don't sometimes even know that when we have to finish our budgeting process. It just depends on how many end up returning papers and we feel confident enough to budget for them.
But I literally check it every day. How many ninth graders have registered? And I will do again, like before we get done, how many 10 through 12th graders have we gained or lost since I did the prediction, so. It is a super fluid number.
One of the things I'm hoping to get from the board tonight as feedback is, what would you like us to work on? Would you like us to work on giving you some options for one-time purchases? Would you like us to work on giving you some items to consider reductions? Are you working toward a certain tax increase? Are you, there are a lot of things still in play, but we can start working on some things to be able to give you options.
I mean, my thoughts. I always look at 2 numbers. I look at tax impact and I look at the increase in expenses relative to inflation, because that's what we have control over. The tuition students and the state funding are somewhat outside of our control. It's a 5.5% increase in expenses, which is better than I would like to see, but on the other hand, we're still rippling through some of the teacher and staff contract increases that were much higher than inflation, so it's maybe not realistic to expect to get that number back down to inflation. There are a bunch of one-time costs that are in there. There's not huge staff growth, so I mean it's a number I can live with. The tax number, I would like to see that. When I first heard the state number, I was thinking we could get that number to negative, which I don't think anymore, but I'd like to see it get to within rounding error of 0. I don't know what that means, 70,000 or something like that. But I think there's a lot of options still to get there. I think, we presumably have worst case on tuition and insurance right now. And as I've probably been telegraphing, I would be extremely comfortable with some focus on one-time expenses this year. And it's not very hard for me to see as much as 250K in one-time expenses between the basic curriculum, the network stuff, the band. There's also a big chunk of sports stuff that I think, like the tennis court, is arguably in the ballpark of a one-time too.
Plus, we're gonna build one of those courts in.
We're gonna what?
We're gonna build one of those courts in.
He's talking about pickleball.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know.
Okay.
I was gonna let it just go right over my head,
Earlier you said, and I understand you're saying we do need to spend the carry forward down, but you were a little reluctant not knowing what might happen federally. Has anyone, whether you or Lynn or anyone else, has anyone looked at what our worst case scenario is if we lost everything federally for next year.
450.
But is that the direct federal? I mean, you were talking about these indirects through the state, you know.
That's just what we receive. I mean, I don't know if the state lost all money, if there would be trickle down of other things that we would lose.
I heard, and I don't know if it's true, I heard that roughly 40% of the state budget comes from the federal.
That's too high. I believe it's 10% at the state level. There are individual districts that get as much as some of the poorer rural districts get 30%.
I'm gonna say the highest in the state is about a third, right?
Yeah, I'm
Real
pretty,
low income rural, some low income rural districts that get, I think, around a third of their money from federal dollars.
and there are states in southern Maine that get zero. I'm pretty sure I saw the state average,
Ours is actually
Across the state.
591,000.
591
I wasn't speaking, about specific school districts. I've heard that,
statewide. I think.
well, not even the statewide average. I've heard that, and it may not be correct number, but overall, roughly 40% of what the state of Maine gets altogether comes from the federal government. So
So like
if they lost
USDA,
education.
correct. So if they lost that 40%, would there be shifts other places, including education?
we haven't heard anything yet.
Yeah.
We haven't.
I mean, I guess the question partially is, like, in this budget cycle, of what the state is promising us for the next 12 months, they're like, is there a scenario in which something happens mid-year and some of that doesn't come through? Or is it like that'll?
That can happen.
The state
You
budget?
use the word state and promise. You should.
Yeah, okay.
Number one, this is a preliminary allocation still. So it's not final until the legislature passes the budget.
And that happens.
Well, it sometimes happens as late as early July. When they, and so if that happens, we have to just base it on what we know at the time or budget.
Supposed to happen in
I'm
April.
gonna say, we'd like to see it happen in April. The chances of that are probably pretty slim.
Given the way they're going on the
And
supplemental.
I think there is a mechanism that the state can go back and take away funds and suspend payments, and that's why we want to have enough funds in our unassigned to bridge expenses for.
And
But we can do, I mean, like you said, if we wanna. We wanna take more out of unassigned than was approved in the budget vote in June, we would have to go back to the voters again. We can also go back to the voters for a tax increase.
that's what,
So both of those, those are the two knobs that we have in response if 30% of
do
our
we need a
budget
vote for the
disappears.
town to take more out of unassigned?
But can't we call a meeting? We don't have to do a vote at town hall. We can call a meeting and for unassigned. I believe we can.
Can we just do that with a public meeting?
I think so.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
like our
Okay.
annual meeting.
But under the scenario of like,
Taxes, though, we'd have to do.
Taxes, we'd have to have a paper voting on.
which, in the case where like, oh, everything goes whatever, like, that would probably not be that unreasonable.
Right,
Yeah,
I mean, I also
mean, that
think
would-
we'd have to look seriously at expenses.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. They're new bookcases.
well, we don't, but if the whole world goes upside down and
Yeah, but we're in a position where we can, even if the whole world goes upside down, we can probably avoid that.
we can, even for probably a couple of years.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know, in theory, yeah, yep. I mean, that's kind of my thinking, I'd like to keep the, unassigned big enough that we could cover 2 years, worst case, if we had to,
Of federal funds.
with
Yeah.
federal funds, yeah.
But we could do that without making any changes to one-time purchases or the amount that we use in the budget. We could just keep that at 929. We can still do almost 100,000 of one-time purchases. We can do
I think even 200,000.
200,000 for capital improvement. We can do all of those things and still do what you're describing.
I think
For
so.
me, I'd like to see this decrease number to zero. But at the same time, I don't necessarily see anything that screams out, be taken out. So, I mean, I'd like to see a list of one-time purchases put forward. And then at the same time, I mean, if if there are things that in reevaluating, you think could be reduced or eliminated, certainly I'd like to see that. There's nothing, usually most years, there's at least one or two things that jumps out at me screaming, I don't think so. There's really nothing on here this time that does that out of the stuff you've listed, so.
Nice chairs.
Oh, one possibility on that though is we could sponsor those, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, that's,
true.
that's certainly, I was thinking, we've done that in the past.
Yeah.
Other schools do that. I think we could easily do that with a sponsorship model.
Yeah,
That's-
and
that's
we're
an
looking
easy-
at the athletic checkbook for a couple of other things, which is why I put those in here, because there's some other things that we're looking at the athletic checkbook.
But nothing really, there's no big number in here that jumps out at me as, okay, we can put this off. And I certainly don't want to put off the network stuff. I mean, that's given the amount that we rely on reliable, fast internet connection, that seems to be short-sighted. As pissed off as the tennis court makes me, I gotta do it. So I don't really see anything here this time that jumps out, oh, let's remove this or take it out. If something like that presents itself, that's great. But
Yeah, well, I think typically we can give you a list of things that we can tell you, what we see. Because we've done some through the first round with our administrative team, we've done a little bit of paring back and just streamlining things and doing research and making sure we don't have duplicates and, but we haven't done a lot of, no, let's not put that in there. And I think there's some things that we could say, well, this would be nice, but we could also put this off. And we're also, gonna look at staffing and.
why don't we get a list like that and then a list of one-time costs that may be even a little more aggressive than we were last year, right? On the one-time cost stuff and see, because again, I'm just speaking for myself, other people have different thoughts, obviously, but I'd like to see that increase number.
I mean, and just to be explicit, there are 2 staff additions in here, but, yeah, MLL and the halftime accounting, I don't think either one of those are things we can afford to cut.
And then the small moving the IT assistant to.
And the MLL is already here, it's just now we
Make it a
paid for
teacher.
it, we're just making it a teacher instead of an ed.
Yeah.
Right, and we paid for it this year out of contingency because we added it after the budget was passed.
So it's really like double.
It's really the full position that's added to the budget.
And really, another thought on the central office was the CDS.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that. If we add the 3-4-year-old program, taking over, pay for students at, the cohort 2, we did the conversation about the 3-4-year-old, program. That will definitely require some additional manpower, business office to make sure the building's all recovered.
For me, I think I'm fine with this budget as it is. I think I'm okay. I mean, if we want to pull out of unassigned and make it 0, I feel like I want us to be cautious with given the uncertainty, but I also feel like if things happen, I think there will be enough opportunity to do something like a vote or fix it or change things that things really good. So I kind of feel like there are other ways we had to save ourselves.
I agree, may wanna save the ask for later, in case, things get sideways. I agree with people spoken, I'd like to get a list of one-time purchases, I'd be also happy to use a bunch of unassigned to make this, at least within rounding errors, Brian put it. I think probably the public would appreciate that, as they also watch the news of trepidation. Probably not asking them for more money at this moment might be good, in case we have to ask for it later. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot, really. There are a lot of one-time purchases here, like Brian's saying, around 200K, that could very easily be justified from our growing unassigned. I agree.
So I have down, we're going to put together a list of one-time expenses. We're going to, bring back some information on the ELA program at ASA. And what programs that are being considered. So you have a little bit more information, knowing that the full information's yet to come after that. That, you'll soon learn more about the ninth grade, program and what's being considered there and what's in the budget, what's in the grant. And then more about the huddle package with some of those details.
I can ask them again on the site, but it is the 5,500 every year.
Okay, it's
It's the
annual 5,500, yeah. The equipment costs are the one-time install of the equipment. And, but what type of package it is. And then also a list of, you know, any opportunities we see for, reduction ideas. From some of you were saying that.
Mark,
Pepper,
would you
what's your
say
thinking,
basic
Jake?
or what?
There's different levels.
Packages like base versus premium, I don't know,
Right
maybe
now,
mix up.
we have the base and then we pay for a level above that with outside.
Yeah, what, that outside money is just raised.
We should use that outside and we come from our check.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm wondering, like, if, and that's another place, if, I don't know, the folks that do the lights or whatever, and like the chairs and stuff, if there's other ways to fund, whole 5,500 a year or whatever.
It's harder to fund something like that.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah,
a thing that people can look at.
well, isn't that the whole
Yeah.
idea, we can look at them?
Well, I
It's
meant,
not the fun. But I know, what you
you
mean,
know,
like, it's not a physical thing, but it's.
like we talked about with capital improvement, people don't get excited about the roofs when we replace the roofs. They like, you know, the thing that you can walk in and see.
But not razzle dazzle.
Yeah, so,
But this is, yeah.
yeah, but you could do, you know, seek sponsorships from folks for that, but it
I think the
serves a lot
stadium
of,
sheets would be an easier sell.
Yeah, I think so, too.
I think that's a pretty easy
They
one.
can come in and
Most
see
schools
this
do it
chair,
that way. So
yeah.
you can- I think we could do that relatively easily.
Jay, did you have something you were? Okay.
No, I agree. Well, first of all, I appreciate everyone in these buildings that comes to us, like, we don't have to do a lot of cutting, like we kind of used to in the long ago past. So I just want to say I appreciate that what you give us, like Mark said, nothing really is jumping out. And that's because you guys filter that stuff before it comes to us, so I appreciate that. Like,
I don't want to go back to the days of line items.
Mhm.
That was miserable.
Yeah. But no, I agree. If you can get us a list of things that you would recommend for one-time purchase out of carry forward. And then if you can get us a list of things that you may be thinking of that maybe we don't need this year, that would, what we always used to call round one cost. Between those two and see what we have, and then also see where other things come in like insurance.
Yeah.
Tuition.
I did have a number that I wanted to tell you that might just be interesting. It was interesting to me. Lynn and I had to go several rounds until we could figure out this number. So the 10% health insurance increase, it is $177,423. So I know it's not exactly scalable, but you know, we were at 5.73 this year. So we have the same thing next year. You know, you can figure out what that savings what that savings would be.
It doesn't seem to me to be unrealistic at all to get, you know, that 363 down to zero between one-time costs. Better than budgeted for health insurance, and then marginal, if any, right? But not many. And that's even not assuming like better case and tuition. I mean, that's just assuming we get, because the health, and unlike tuition, health insurance will know, right? We'll know before we have to do this. Tuition, we won't know for sure. They'll give us clearer pictures as we get closer, but we don't know, right? We just don't know.
I mean, we could know. The deadline is, when's the deadline for tuition registration? Not that every student.
I was gonna say, even then.
But if we
that's not
had like a
guaranteed.
banner year and everyone turned in their registration, what would that be, Sam, Meredith? I think it's March.
Next week.
Okay.
Because we're
I might-
really done.
I think it's the 6th, but I'm not sure, but it
That's
is a
okay.
stop deadline for sure.
Yeah,
First day of school.
yeah, I mean, you know, kids change their mind over the summer, or they are still deciding
But
through
if
the
we know,
spring.
we have a number of 31 by the end of March, we're like, we don't know that it's gonna be 31, but we're pretty sure it's bigger than 22.
Right,
Right, but I'm saying even not even baking that in, like if we, you know, there, like Brian said, there's some easy one-time purchases here, I think. And then if health insurance comes in where it's coming, roughly that's gonna save us some, you know, maybe not 5 point whatever again, but even if it's at 7, right, it saves us some. And then we figure out how to get the rest, or maybe we figure out, okay, that increase of 90,000, something, whatever.
So Mike said it's the base package with extension system outside. It allows the cameras to be portable from field to field and also extended vertically above the field. I don't know if that helps you.
That doesn't.
Okay.
okay, so March 11th is our next meeting.
Actually not gonna be here that day.
Okay. We'll be bringing back more information that meeting. But we'll also talk about it, you know, the meeting after that. So it's a, you know, as we get closer and closer to our date that we have to vote on this, we, you know, the picture becomes more and more clear. That date is April 29th is when you vote on the budget to direct us to prepare warrants. But really by April 8th, we begin to, you know, hopefully come to agreement on what we're going to bring you that next meeting for you to vote on. So we have 2 more meetings to consider. We need to really get serious. And I think we learn about insurance. I need to look at the date. It's 1st of April, but I felt like it was a little later than normal this year. Hopefully it's not April 11th. That date's sticking in my head. So, okay. Anything else on budget?
Nope, thank you, like Jake said, thank you for all the A, hard work, but B, just cutting the games out and coming to us with something we can work with quickly and easily.
Yes, lots of people on the screen and beyond are certainly to be thanked for that.
All right, on the calendars.
Oh, I forgot. I thought we were on the co-curriculars. No such luck. Okay, so I have an update about calendars. We still are showing you 2 calendars. The UTC conversation resulted in, we're still the outlier. It puts us over, but there's a solution for us being able to keep our preferred draft 2 version that has the full 2 weeks off from December 22nd through January 2nd. And that is if we encourage our UTC students to attend UTC on those 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, and make sure there aren't barriers, like we would provide transportation for those students to go to UTC, then Amanda thinks that can, you know, pass the test of making sure that there's not dissimilar days. Another district had to make a change for us to get to 5 because we were at 8 as a district, as a region. But our 2 days were kind of, you know, the glaring, one of the most glaring pieces of dissimilar days. I think that's a reasonable request because it's not a, you know, it's not a hard ask. If students can attend, they can attend. Kind of like our early release days. Our students don't have to attend UTC on early release days, but you know, UTC's in session. A lot of our students end up just attending because they don't want to miss programming and they go. They're not required to.
They're not gonna be penalized. if they
Not
don't.
going to be penalized.
I'm still more than one district.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, we kind of ended up last time.
Yeah.
Same with
So
the
I think,
calendar.
I think Amanda Peterson was comfortable if we, are providing transportation and encouraging students to attend if they're able, then that would pass the straight face test.
So what 2 days would that be again?
December 22nd and 23rd.
But there's gonna be no staff here on the 23rd.
Oh, there can be people here. Like year-round staff works.
Okay, so there will be people, like students
Yes.
will. be
Yes,
able to
but
come in
I'm not
and-
sure that students would need to come here. They probably would. We'd probably do we haven't worked out exactly how transportation is going to work. But we're going to survey students to see who needs transportation and then figure out what kind of runs we'll do based on that. It might just be that it's not, 3 full Orono runs and 5 full runs at other communities. It might be that we have some van pickup and that we have, a special run that we asked here to do just around Orono. We might have hub pickup in Glenburn, that kind of thing. So it's something that when I talked with Derek and Sam and Meredith, we all agreed that doesn't seem like something that's going to be too difficult to figure out, and we'll closer to the time survey students who plan on attending, who need attendance, who need transportation, because some of them will be excited that we're saying they can drive. Because driving yourself to UTC is actually discouraged because they don't have enough parking. So if students are told you can drive these 2 days, a lot of them will be really excited to be able to just drive themselves there. So we'll see who needs transportation and come up with a plan for that. But we do have staff those days. I know Sam said she's usually around and there are enough people around, I don't know where I'll be, but I could be around and, could be here. So we can see a way to make it work.
So the 22nd, December 22nd, full staff day.
It's actually the trade out day for
The comp day
conferences.
for the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you like this version, our next step would be, I talked with Shauna today, the OEA really needs to, we need to have a MOU to do the, different kind of work day on those 7 early release days to add an hour. And Shauna thinks that she can, work with her executive board to, consider that before our next meeting. All feedback she's gotten has been favorable once, she explained how it worked. And so if we feel like we have that settled, then I can bring this back to vote on, March 11th.
Sounds good.
Any other? So we will stop showing you draft 1 version.
Yeah.
Our version 1.
I would have felt sorry for everybody, teachers and students, if we stuck
Right.
with that.
Yes.
Can't believe all the other districts are.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to co-curriculars. I would make a motion to approve the slate of co-curriculars as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
I have a correction.
Okay,
There's a mistake on this. Next to last, the canoe team head coach is actually Jeff Owen, not Lynn White. Lynn White is coaching track and couldn't do both actually, and it's not ETL.
So Jeff decided to come back.
He did. So as you recall, the canoe team needed either an educational trip leader or a main guide, and Jeff has since obtained his educational trip leader certification. And Jacob Clark is an ed tech course at ASA who also has his educational trip leader certification.
Good thing we kept the canoes.
It's a good thing we kept the canoes. So, correct Jeff Owen on your list.
okay. Just very quickly, drama, spring play, Molly Webster, varsity baseball, head coach Don Joseph, varsity baseball assistant coach Chris Bagley, JV baseball, tentative Griffin Costello, varsity softball head Kristen Espling, varsity softball assistant Todd Hillier, JV softball, tentative based on numbers Alyssa Kubish, varsity tennis girls Sierra Tibbetts, varsity tennis boys Zach Arnold, JV tennis coach Crystal Bell, outdoor track head coach Derek Treadwell, assistant track coaches Lynn White, Emily Francis, Cade Workman, and Noah Parker, canoe team head coach Jeff Owen, and canoe team assistant coach Jacob Clark. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Move on to policies. We'll start with policy FF. We had a discussion about this at the last board meeting, so I think a lot of people were comfortable, we were looking at a really long version or a short version. A lot of people were comfortable in the middle, so that's kind of where we went. And so we're bringing forward a policy that covers the original goal of having some clear language to back up the superintendent about the amount of planning and detail that's needed in advance, and kind of reasserting that everything defaults back to the decision of the board of directors. This is in addition to the existing policy, so I would make a motion to approve the revisions to policy FF as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or questions?
So what's the 75 supermajority?
That's if we're gonna take money for a corporate naming.
Oh, so 4 of the 5.
If whatever, the University Credit Union wanted to have NOPAC named after them.
Okay.
That's more than just a 50% decision.
Okay, totally boring.
Yeah. That basically means a board unanimous decision to do it.
There's a really discussion, but I just want to point out that it's 8 o'clock.
I know, I was trying to get their
If our
attention.
students.
Marissa, Connor, if you guys wanna.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, they're welcome to stay.
Yep. Welcome to leave for sure.
We did drag you through the fire alarm.
Yeah.
Isn't it my first time today talk about budgets, so.
Yeah, you're a veteran. Okay, any other questions on FF? We'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor of the revision? Passes 5-0. As Meredith explained, the ACs, we thought we got them out of committee, and then we got more updates from Drummond and Woodson. It's a fast changing area. And it comes down to a balance between the federal executive orders and state law, and we want to make sure we capture the state law piece of it. Especially as it had more of what we had before. So we're going to bring those back again. I don't think actually there's any changes to JLCDE. So I would make a motion to adopt JLCD revision as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
And that is picking up 2 changes in the law. One is we had previously adopted something that allowed Narcan to be kept on campus and administered. This expands it to other non-injected opioid overdoses. It's just kind of expanding it past the one specific Narcan, and it also slightly different mechanism about how we keep the stuff on premise. It requires working with a medical person to give us the prescription to keep a generic, not a generic, but a general use glucagon on campus, but also allows us to do this for diabetes students going into, or staff members going into diabetic shock. So any other questions on JLCD?
There's also the student training component.
And there's also the student training down at the bottom. We did have a conversation about that. Basically, there is training that's already happening as part of the health curriculum, but the law requires an extracurricular option as well. And we thought, what the heck, their students might have got it in 9th grade and want it again in 12th grade. So we want to make sure that we're not going to argue with that. We'll just have an extracurricular option too. Any other questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Policy subcommittee, so we did. We're going to go back to the AC policies. We also have some work on the generative AI guidelines. Those will be the work for the next couple meetings, probably. UTC.
We didn't really cover much. It was a Zoom snowstorm meeting. So actually I had to go back to the agenda. Nothing to report. I think we'll talk about bigger things when we can meet in person probably next week.
Okay. Curriculum subcommittee got canceled because of a snowstorm. Wellness committee, I'm guessing you haven't met since the last report, Noah. And strategic plan leadership is this Thursday. Any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? Floor is open for public comment. Seeing no public comment. Our next meeting is February, March 11th. Oh, that's not right. Tuesday, March 11th.
Oh,
At 6 p.m. in the library and on Zoom. Any requests for information and follow-up? Hearing none, I would motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
A second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. There's never discussion on the motion to adjourn.
Good discussion, actually.